All right. Do I have everybody still here? Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first edition of CoreNet Cafe. Really excited to have everybody here and get started with this today. We'll definitely look forward to your feedback as we continue forward. But we'll be bringing you fresh industry perspectives from leading personalities in our Mid-Atlantic chapter community. So it's a great chance to get to know some of the folks here in the chapter and hear some great insights on the local market and at large in corporate real estate. My name's Mitch Dowd, and I'll be co-hosting today's show alongside my good friend and Mid-Atlantic chapter colleague, Nicole Thomas from Steelcase. Um, since today's our first show, I just wanted to introduce what you can expect from the format. One of those is a quick disclaimer. You may hear a screaming baby at some point. I just had a baby a few weeks ago, but generally she's great around this time. So, and we just fed her right before this in a timely fashion. So should be good there, but um, yeah, don't be surprised. So we'll be interviewing speakers on a weekly basis on varying topics. It'll be an interactive discussion with us, and then you can also engage over the messaging feature that's in GoToWebinar. So please, at any point, post your questions up there, and we're going to allot some time at the end to get to them as we can. The second thing is you'll see your video feeds populating in the meeting window. They may be small. You may still have the background screen. If you want, you can resize that video feed so you can get a better view of our faces. So that's all of the housekeeping I've got for today. We look forward to a great show, and I think with that, we'll get started. So I'm excited to be joined today by Kathy Del Coco. She's a leading member of the Mid-Atlantic corporate real estate community, as some of you may know. And she's a vice chairman with CBRE's Advisory and Transaction Services Group, specializing in corporate representation of clients, including in government contracting, media, technology, and other industries. So without further ado, Kathy, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining.
Thanks, appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So I thought we had some great conversations leading up to today, and I'm excited to pick up where we left off. Why don't we start out with a little intro? Could you give us a summary on your role at CBRE and the group you lead here locally?
Sure. So I've been with CBRE 31 years, a long time, probably a lot longer than a lot of you guys have been in the business. And I co-lead a team of 11 individuals. We're actually like a small business. You know, if you look at the revenues we generate on a national and a global basis, on average, it's $20 million a year. So when a lot of these small businesses talk about, you know, their employees, their challenges, we're really looking at our business in much the same way. So I co-lead with another woman, which is very unusual, Meredith Lapierre, in our industry, to have not one, but two women leading a brokerage team. But our team is much more, not really transactional in nature, but much more consultative in nature. We bring a lot of different services to our corporate users on a daily basis. And interestingly enough, we've been using a tremendous amount of technology. And as this COVID has taught us, we're going to be using more and more technologies and bringing more things to our clients. You know, we talked, as you said, Mitch, you know, we talked about technologies that your company does, you know, sensing data, you know, badging, et cetera. We're going to be looking at a lot of different things that we'll be bringing to the forefront.
That's great. I just want to pause. Go ahead. Sorry, Nicole.
Oh, sorry. Kathy, how long have you been involved with CoreNet?
So I've been, you know, I lose track of time sometimes. You know, someone told me whenever you say a time frame, you might double it. It's been more than a decade. So I've enjoyed CoreNet. One of the things I enjoy about it is all the different disciplines, you know, because in our world to be successful, we need everyone. You know, I need, you know, Nicole, you with furniture, I need construction people. I need the architects. We are a network. And one of the nice things about our region, if you look at our region versus other regions, we are very collaborative. You know, we're friends with our competitors. It all works out very well. So I've enjoyed CoreNet and the exchange of ideas. I was lucky enough to chair the gala a couple of years ago, and that was super fun.
Yeah, and really quick, actually, you touched on something we talked about a couple times. I think's really interesting for now in COVID, like you mentioned, but also overall a change in the brokerage industry. That consultative service and the integrated things that you're doing, coming in as an advisor, like you mentioned. Can you kind of give me a little more, or give us a little more detail on what that looks like for your team and how it's important for leading up to today and also COVID in general?
So, one of the things, because a lot of people are, especially people that are just getting into the business are a little bit nervous. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. You've asked, what my history was. I got into this business in 1989. 1989, 1990 was the S&L crisis. And everybody thought the commercial real estate world would end. This is bad for commercial real estate. That was really bad. Landlords were all losing their buildings. And in order to survive, the truth of the matter is, I think I've done well. A lot of my success is because I started then and I learned how to do business in an environment that was very challenging. So for those of you that are fairly new to the business, it's not a bad thing to start at a downtime. I think sometimes if you start at an uptime, you have unrealistic expectations. But back to your question about our team and the consultative approach, a couple years ago, we hired a gentleman that was very experienced in Tableau. He is our data analyst. Again, what we have on our team are people that are heads down. Our clients need and want us to study their portfolios. Today they're asking us, look at our portfolios, help us analyze them, and tell us where we can have savings. We want to, there's a lot of restructuring of leases happening right now. It is for sure going to be a strong tenants market as we emerge from this. Even the first quarter alone, the deal velocity on a national basis was down 18%. It's going to be down 35 to 50% by the end of the year. So, we're going to come out of this very strong on the tenant side of the business. Sorry for the landlords, but that's the way the arc goes up and down. So the data is very important. We're today doing, again, badging studies because a lot of clients are saying, well, what's my workplace going to look like? A lot of people are used to now working at home and they're being very productive. And we're saying, let's study the badging data before COVID, because 9 times out of 10, the badging data will show you didn't need the space you had to begin with. You could have gotten by with 30 to 50% less. So if you compound that and look at the groups that can and will work at home, let's look at all that data to help you make intelligent decisions on your space.
Yeah, I love that. And it makes a ton of sense to me. Going into a transaction, there are a lot of different factors. So having that integrated approach and, Tableau having that person on staff, that's a hot item these days. So I'm sure it's great to have him. Everybody definitely likes looking at dashboards and making requests for changes on the fly. I know I've dealt with that a lot. So no, I really appreciate that background. And I really enjoyed our conversation about how the market is responding. You touched on a bit of that. Especially thrilled about it because of your line of work. As we've talked about, you've got a firsthand view over multiple industry verticals. So it's a different picture for lots of folks. And then looking across, the country, there's different markets reacting in different ways. So picking back up on the dynamics of the current health pandemic, could you give us your perspective on how tenant requirements are changing and or will continue to evolve over the future?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that, again, people are saying, people that never before thought that they could work at home are finding that, yes, in fact, we can work at home. I recently had a conversation with a defense contractor in our market, and he said, look, as we know, the defense community has been slow to adapt some of the changes. Some companies have been more open plan, have been some working from home, but in general, they've wanted more office intensive space. And for the most part, they say, we cannot work at home. No, my group, maybe your group can, but my group can't work at home. And this individual said to me, look, these people are all working from home. and they're doing their jobs. Now, certainly if you have to be in a skiff space, I have a girlfriend that has to be in a skiff space on a daily basis. That's a little different, but the skiffs are a very small portion of the office space that most of these contractors work in. So I think we're going to see a wholesale shift of people. The work at home model has been in place for a long time, but how widely has it been adapted? Now, the landlords will say to me, well, Kathy, I think that's going to be offset by social distancing. So we're going to have a net new, it's going to be neutral. People aren't going to be giving up space. And I would say in some instances that's true. I'll use Freddie Mac as an illustration. Freddie Mac, we helped them find some space in Arlington not too long ago for a group. And shortly after they occupied, they said they were going to put it on the market for sublease. I have another tenant that was looking at it when we called the other day and said, hey, we're really interested in this space. What they said was, actually, we're taking it off the market because we're going to use that space because we need more space for social distancing. So I think that's going to happen in the short term as people adjust to how do we social distance, how much space do we need, how do we configure our space. They're going to need swing space to reconfigure their other spaces. But I think when the dust settles 18 months from now, the requirements are going to be much smaller for office space.
It's so funny because there was a conversation going around, and it was basically like, what led your digital transformation? And it was like, was it your CEO, your CTO, or COVID-19? And it's really forced people to have this, new look at this work from home scenario. So you and your team, what does this kind of return to our new normal look like for you and for CBRE?
So I think CBRE, actually, the weekend before CBRE said nobody's going to the office, they had issued a mandate, and we had tried to figure out which half of our team could go to work one week and which half could go the other week. And I think if you talk, I know CoreNet's having a session on back to work on May 6th, but if you talk to most corporations, they're going to go back in shifts. Everyone's not going to go back. So that's first of all what's going to happen. But secondly, I think even if a month from now, let's say, and I think it's more likely 2 months from now, people start going back to work, there's going to be a lot of people that are uncomfortable about setting forth, into the workspace, because there's no 100% guarantee that, in fact, you're not going to be exposed to the virus. There's a lot of work that has to be done. Landlords, have to put in no-touch elevators, office doors, and a lot of the cleaning supplies aren't even available right now. So even with that in place, how comfortable are all of us going to feel going back to work? And in my instance, it's not just how comfortable I am for myself personally, but I have 2 children. I have to think about, it's not just all about me. What am I bringing home to the house on a daily basis?
Right, completely. And one thing we talked about was CBRE with Workplace 360. You guys are a leader in workplace change. You've just released this new office space in DC, and you might be going there versus Tyson's. What do you think that looks like? And will you be going into the office? Those flexible arrangements, do they have a play into COVID? And just additionally, to add one more point, you mentioned spacing in offices that folks are doing. So a little bit of a change to workplace strategy, and walking that back, what does that mean for tenant requirements on space? Do they need more now per person? Sorry, I know
Yeah.
that was a lot.
Yeah, again, I think they might need more per person right now, but I talked to a tenant yesterday that's in about 20,000 square feet, and we talked about, hey, you got to work out the social distancing, and they said, look, again, we had done badging study for them previously. They didn't need as much space as they had. They said strongly that we need less space. We're going to need less space. We're going to have a lot more people working from home. Again, they're a defense contractor. I myself, our team for the most part, hey, how many Zoom meetings have you guys been on in the past, month?
Too many.
Too many.
Exactly. But some good is coming out of it. My partner, Meredith, said recently she negotiated a lease, and we do lease negotiations all the time by conference call. She said she did it by Zoom, and it was fabulous. You could see people's faces. A lot more got accomplished. So I think that what's going to be interesting is what is the new normal. And I think the new normal is going to be, while we're all tired of Zooming, I think we're going to put a fair amount of that and appreciate that in our work environment. My team, for the most part, can work at home. Having said that, one of my team members is on a tour today, which is interesting because most buildings, really aren't touring. We're not supposed to be touring unless we get permission. But what he's doing is he's going to one building. I mean, some requirements do have to move forward. He's going to one building, and then they're going to walk around other buildings in DC where they have the floor plans. They're not going in the buildings, and just talk about what the requirement is, because these people have to be in July. I mean, they do have to make decisions. You asked earlier about what's changed and trending in technology. Our company has a program. We have what's called Spacer and Floored. Floored's an interesting technology, and what it does is we can take a floor plan, and this is not to replace any of you architects out there. That's what we tell our clients. But you can take a floor plan, you can put it on Floored, and in fact, we can look out the windows, the actual windows. People can see what their views are. You can do it in 3-dimensional. We're doing all kind of virtual tours right now, and we're using that as a means for people to see the space without actually walking into the space. So, the interesting things of the pandemic will be, what are the new technologies that are going to come out of this and be used on a daily basis?
So it's so interesting to hear you talk about technologies and connecting them to experience, which I think is, like you said, a major driver we're going to see happening. But I wanted to kind of ask a personal question, since my favorite part of the Zoom, since I'm on meetings all the time, is getting to learn a little about the person. So I'm just kind of curious, are you in your home office right now? Can you tell us about your space?
Sure. I'm in my home office right now, but I think I shared with the both of you, my 13-year-old son has taken over my home office, and we're having discussions. I'd say more arguments, but the nice way to do it is to say discussions about who gets my home office. So I'm buying some desks. Again, interestingly enough, I'm buying some desks for my son and daughter so that they can have good, comfortable workplaces. But I actually am physically at my beach house. I'm fortunate enough to have a beach house in Lewis, Delaware. And we came here 5 weeks ago. COVID's one reason, but the biggest reason is my house was under renovation when all this started. And there was no way, with everyone coming in and out and having a makeshift kitchen in the basement, that I could have survived without going someplace else. So that's where we're at. We're at the beach house right now.
And I think it just shows like we can really get work done anywhere.
Yeah.
And as we're looking at, I don't know, I mean, I think I'm going to ask you about your crystal ball here. So when we're thinking about the market outlook, right? So we look, you don't just work in the Mid-Atlantic, you work all over the country. So we're looking at a national outlook and a local outlook. How do you think this is going to change our workplace strategy?
Well, a couple things. First of all, if you look at the national outlook, there are markets that are being affected not just by COVID. We have clients that are in the oil and gas industry. So, if you're in Houston, Texas, or Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, you're not just suffering from COVID. If you're in commercial real estate and your industry is oil and gas, you're having challenges related to that. So I think, it's almost a industry by industry as we look around, who's doing well, who's hurting right now. And that's going to happen on a state by state basis also. one of the things is, if you look at the statistics for the Washington region, you know, some recessions, and for the most part, most recessions we've weathered better than the rest of the country. I will say that did not happen in 2008, and it's because we had the double whammy. In 2008, we had BRAC, you know, we had government insourcing, so those worked against us, but for the most part, our region has done better, and a lot of it's because we have the government here. You know, a lot of our defense contracting clients, while they're being smart about their business, they're not cutting back like our media clients. Our media clients, their subscription rates are through the roof, but they have no advertisers. You know, so, you know, those people, you know, those industries are suffering. So if you look around, I think, Nicole, our region will fare much better than some of the others. So if it takes 2 to 3 years to recover, we'll be more 12 to 18 months of recovery. But what recovery looks like, we don't know.
Right, right. And so obviously you mentioned government. Are there other industries you see faring better than some?
You know, well, hey, I have a friend that works for Verizon. He's a legal counsel in one of their groups, and they're booming. You know, Verizon, and it makes sense. We all need the technology. You know, I think I told you guys at the beach here, we don't have Verizon. I would like to switch to Verizon. Sorry, Comcast, but you know, Comcast is here, and I was on the phone for 3 hours upgrading my service. So I think if you look around, you know, there's obviously Amazon. We all know that Amazon's doing very well. So if we look around at some industries, they've done well in this. We had some of the CEOs of some top industries on a Zoom call the other day. You know, food services, you know, companies that supply food service. The gentleman from ABM was saying, look, you know, when you look at food services, the food service industry supplies a lot of food to sporting events. So, you know, things we don't think about how that has really hurt them. They also provide food service to healthcare. But again, that's a smaller industry. I mean, what is our food services in our offices going to look like? You know, I've heard that CBRE is saying, hey, we're going to bring food to the office so that people don't have to go out for lunch on a daily basis. But again, what will that food service look like? It used to be that we would put out a buffet in the kitchen. That's not going to happen. You know, the food's probably good. Everything's going to be individually packaged. You know, people are going to go in one by one to pick up the food. You're not going to stand in, you know, a big line close together. So lots changing.
And then one last question on this. So what are you seeing happening with vacancy rates and concessions? We have a lot of people on the call that are probably really interested in how this is going to affect their current space. And, you know, with your expertise with tenants, like what can they be doing now with their landlord?
So, you know, our industry in general is a lag industry, meaning that, you know, if a recession hits, normally commercial real estate's still going well, and then a year later it really hits us. In this instance, we're being hit now. You know, there's no lag in it. Having said that, there's a lag in the reality of what the concessions are going to be. When I talk to landlords, I'm still getting proposals, and you know, I had a client yesterday say, my God, this proposal, didn't you expect it to be much more aggressive, Kathy? The issue is when I talk to the landlord broker, they go, look, we're only 6 weeks into this. Who knows what's going to happen? Well, we all know what's going to happen. It is a tenant's market. And what's happening is the vacancy rates are going to go up dramatically. Some companies are not going to make this, and so their space is going to go back on the market. There's going to be a rush of sublease space coming to the market, which if you go back to the tech bust, that was when we first started to really track sublease space, because there was so much space put on the market in the technology sector. So it's clearly all indicators going to be a tenant's market. But the landlords may be slow to grant the concessions that they need to grant and lower the rental rates. I will also suggest that in 2008, during the recession, you know, when people expected rental rates to drop, the buildings are owned by banks, institutions, pension funds. Some of them have lots of staying power. So they're going to say, I'm not dropping it. I'd rather hold on to the space. So I think we need to be prepared and prepare our clients for that. The concessions also already in the United States, the Washington, D.C. market had the highest concessions in the country because we wanted to keep our rental rates up. So landlords were granting lots of free rent and lots of abatement. So the real question is, how much more can they give? When I started in the market, and I'm again dating myself, in 1989, when you had the S&L crisis, you could get a 5-year lease with 2 years of rental abatement. So, you know, it would not be unforeseen that something like that could happen. I would also suggest, as I said earlier, a lot of tenants, the retail market, as we know, has been hit so hard. And the restaurant business, they've all been asking and getting rental abatement. Landlords don't want them to go out of business. They want them to come back. And hopefully most will, but I think a fair amount won't. The office tenants started asking for rental abatement and restructuring of leases starting in April. I think in May, we're going to see another rash of that for companies that are having difficulty, not only today, but foresee that happening in the future. And what we're finding is landlords are working with tenants because, again, they want those tenants, especially ones that they know will come back strong. They want those tenants to survive and do well.
So it sounds like your message is, you know, call your broker if you haven't already, and, you know, just be ready and willing to work with your landlord.
Exactly. Landlords work with tenants and tenants work with landlords. I think everyone's in a good mindset right now.
I know we have a couple questions and we're running out towards the end. I just had one quick question for you. You know, we all have a little more free time than we're used to having. We're at home. I understand you're reading a really interesting book right now. Could you share that so we can,
Yeah,
you know?
actually, you had asked me about that. So this is the
All
book
right.
I'm reading. If you can see it, it's called Say Nothing. With 10% of the US population being Irish, this is a book about the IRA and their struggles in Northern Ireland, which I knew nothing about. It is not an uplifting book, I will confess that, but it's very engrossing and interesting. It's a true story, but it's a compelling read.
That's
I
great. I'm
already
glad you got
have
the
it on
prop.
my phone.
I'm glad you got the prop right there. And
Yeah.
like I mentioned earlier, and I think Nicole agreed, we're definitely looking forward to the Netflix series rendition so that we can
Yeah.
engage with the story. So we don't have a ton of time here, but wanted to see if we could just squeeze in one question. We touched on this a little bit, but going back to the tenant requirements, thinking about building equipment, like ventilation controls, any new or emphasis, new requirements or emphasis on those requirements that you're getting now amid the pandemic?
Yeah. So anyway, we just actually we've just put together a list of questions you should ask your landlords, and one of the big ones is HVAC and fresh air. One of the things I love about this business is even after the time period I've been in it, you're constantly learning. So now I'm learning about well buildings. Meridian just is opening the first well building in Washington, D.C. So, you know, I've got a whole list of what that means, but fresh air is really important. You know, one of the things about a well building you can do from the start, it's a lot of it's a DOAS system for the HVAC. We don't see a lot of that here, but we're going to see more and more. So, you know, I think we should all be looking up well buildings and talking to our landlords about, you know, what they're doing, not just on fresh air, but on cleanliness, et cetera, the water supply. You know, there's a lot of factors. We've got a whole list, and I'm happy to provide that to people.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's super unique to the current time. So I think we're running up on time here. Kathy, it's been absolutely fantastic speaking with you. I loved all our conversations leading up to this and this. You've got some great insight. So that's a wrap for the program today. We want to thank all of our listeners and just remember we're going to be doing this weekly for the foreseeable future. So come join us at CoreNet Café. Definitely a great opportunity
We'll
to
see you
connect
next
with the community.
Friday.
Bye. Now how do I get out?